Okay, just making sure I'm getting everything all set here. Happy 4th of July. Happy Independence Day. In case you may not know who I am, but I somehow just popped up onto your feed. Happy 4th of July. I am Dr. Chloe Carmichael. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm super interested in free speech. Specifically, I am super interested in the mental health benefits of free speech because I recently found out as I was writing my new book, which is called Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. I recently found out that about 90% of the therapists, people in my field, identify as liberal, which is totally great. That's a wonderful thing. And in fact, liberal people used to be very strongly linked with free speech. As I was writing my book, I was discovering in the 80s and 90s, it was actually the conservatives that would challenge free speech because there were issues about pornography or explicit lyrics on rap albums, and conservatives wanted to stop that. So it used to be that liberal people were more on the side of free speech. However, right now, it seems like maybe because free speech has become politicized and Elon Musk, is a free speech absolutist, um, many liberal people I have noticed are more concerned about hate speech and bullying than they are about free speech, which means that since the field of psychology is about 90% people who identify as liberal, I feel like that means that there's not enough psychologists that are talking about the benefits, the mental health benefits of free speech, of which there are many, which is why I wrote my book about the mental health benefits of free speech. So I really encourage you, if you have any questions or comments about the topic of free speech and why it's good for mental health, by all means, put them in the chat, put them in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to sound off a little bit about the mental health benefits of free speech because it's the 4th of July. I don't know if you're in the United States or not. Maybe even put in the chat, where are you located? Are you celebrating the 4th of July? Even if you're not in the United States, you can still celebrate the 4th of July if you want to. And the First Amendment in our Bill of Rights, of course, focuses on freedom of speech. So I thought, what better time than now to talk about the mental health benefits of free speech? So why speak up? You can see we have this really simple outline here about the benefits of open dialogue and the costs of self-censorship. So when we think about language, the gifts of language, organizing and labeling our thoughts, we have this internal life, feelings, experiences. They're what psychologists call amorphous, meaning like they're not defined, they don't have a body. Language gives them shape. Language gives us a body of, way to express ourselves. And so that's what the graphic here is, where it takes this kind of jumbled thought stream inside of our head, and we choose a specific word, and we put a fine point on what it is that we're thinking, and that is actually really soothing for us. And when we do that, even just by ourselves in a journal or in the presence of another person, you see the picture I have on screen now is somebody has like really jumbled thoughts in their head, and then they're telling them to another person, and the thoughts are getting organized, right? Because when we communicate to another person, we're forced to find a way to make our internal life understandable to somebody else so that they can understand the sentence structure that we're saying, and that actually benefits us as well. So again, my goal for those of you who are joining now, I'm super excited to see people are joining in, is that I always want to talk about the mental health benefits of free speech, but because it's the 4th of July, First Amendment, freedom of speech, it just seemed like the perfect day to get online here and share with you guys about the mental health benefits of free speech. Also to celebrate my new book, which is coming out. If you want to pick that up, you can go to freespeechtoday.com. Or you can also, please do feel free to put your comments, questions, anything experiences that you've had with freedom of speech or expressing yourself in the chat. And there's another side to free speech as well that I want people to know about, which is that it's not only good for you to express yourself, it's good for the people around you when you express yourself, because they get to know you better. And then, so we have an epidemic of loneliness right now. And I think the epidemic of loneliness in part has to do with people having cancel culture issues. They're so afraid of, saying the wrong thing or, whatever. So they kind of put on a front. So when you are who you really are, it not only helps you better, it helps the people around you better. And I also want to talk about what I call listening resiliently, which means that if people are saying something, they're expressing themselves, they're doing their free speech. Maybe you don't really like it. We've all had that, right? It's just a given. We're not going to agree on everything. But I encourage you to make an effort not to shut their speech down. Encourage them, ask them why they think what they think, how they came to feel that way, if they ever had any life experiences that challenged what they're thinking, if they would like maybe to hear your perspective. Keep the conversation going, even if, I would almost say, especially if you disagree. So free speech includes speaking, of course, but it also includes listening. So we want to speak freely and listen resiliently. So some other benefits of speech and why it's good for mental health is that it helps us to develop good ideas and to discard bad ideas. So haven't we all had the experience of saying something and then we say, you know what, as I say that aloud, it actually doesn't make any sense. I take that back, right? And that's because when we speak, we literally have the chance to hear ourselves. And that's why I put these kind of building blocks on the screen, because it's like you're taking your thoughts and you're putting them on the table and you can examine them objectively. I was actually a yoga teacher years ago before I was a clinical psychologist. And in mindfulness, that's one of the things that we do is we learn to observe our thoughts kind of like objects. And then we don't have to be attached to our thoughts. We can let them go. And speaking is actually part of mindfulness meditation exercise practices, is you observe your thoughts and you put them into words. So again, I'm super surprised that more psychologists are not talking about the mental health benefits of free speech, to encourage you to speak up, find your words. And if you say something and it doesn't sound right, that's fine. Free speech is still working for you. You can take it back. Now, the other side, the positive side is that we've also had the experience of speaking and developing our ideas, developing our good ideas. As we hear an idea and we say it, we say, oh yeah, that makes me think X, Y, Z plus this, plus that, right? So language helps us to develop good ideas and to discard bad ideas. And as I mentioned, it gives us that healthy detachment. So this man here is like putting the Post-its on the glass and looking at them. He's putting his thoughts on the wall, so to speak, and on the table and examining them. And that's how we can be more reflective about our speech, as well as, what other people are saying too. We want to be a good sounding board for people. So we want to avoid, I know it's so easy. I watch YouTube videos too, and it's like, oh, so-and-so owned, this debate, like it's all about fire and who's right, but if we can try to actually just really listen with curiosity. There's a technique as well just called reflective listening, where if somebody's saying something and you just reflect it back to them, even if you don't agree with it, you say, oh, okay, so you're saying that you do or don't support affirmative action for X, Y, and Z reasons. Do I have that right? And that's just being a really good sounding board for the other person. And as I said as well, we're in an epidemic of loneliness. So the more that we can increase our listening skills and make ourselves easy people for someone else to open up to, that they don't have to be afraid that we're going to jump all over them just because maybe they said something that we disagree with. In fact, we should want a diversity of opinions, right? So if you have friends or family members this 4th of July and they're saying things about, politics or anything else that you think are nuts, great. In a weird way, that's your chance to practice, this idea of listening resiliently. And once you've done that, where you've reflected back and you've said what you understood them to say, even if you disagree with it, you say it in a respectful voice. This is what you think. Is that right? And they say, yeah. You say, okay, would you like to hear what I think? And then, who's going to say no, right? And frankly, if they do say no, great. You don't have to waste your breath with someone who from the outset expresses that they don't want to hear it. But once you've gotten them to verbally commit, like, yeah, I do want to hear what you have to say, then you're really setting up a dialogue. And again, don't worry if, you disagree or they disagree. That's actually when things can be interesting, again, a diversity of opinions. So I'm super excited to see people. If you want to put stuff in the chat to share, times that you've struggled with free speech or any thoughts or feelings or questions about speaking up or about listening well when other people are saying things that you don't like, by all means, just put them in the chat and we can interact. So I want to talk as well about, again, the mental health benefits of free speech. So when we have to just what I call pantomime a politically correct idea, whether you're in a classroom or a workplace setting and, there's some theory or policy that's being put out that maybe you think doesn't really make any sense, or I've had people say, well, how come we can have an affinity group at work for women but we can't have an affinity work group for men or whatever, and they find that to be unfair, but they don't say it. They just sit there and they kind of parrot, okay, yeah, great, I support women, but like inside they're thinking this doesn't make any sense. And frankly, even as a woman, I've had those thoughts myself. And I just want to share with you guys, I used to be one of the biggest self-censorers. So the opposite of free speech is what psychologists call self-censorship, where you just keep things inside. I did that quite a lot, okay, to get through graduate school. I knew that if I didn't agree with certain opinions that were being expressed by the professor, it would just not bode well for me to challenge them. So I would pantomime. I would kind of parrot or pretend to agree. So that's what the pictures here on the screen are representing, is I would kind of pretend to agree. But that never creates authentic change. I wish that I had actually really told the professors what I was really thinking, because when we tell each other what we're really thinking, we can actually probably even experience authentic change. We can actually truly even come to change our minds, or somebody else changes their minds, when we don't have to pretend that we agree with somebody just because it feels politically correct, or just because we don't know how to handle conflict, or something like that. So I encourage people to know that when you have real conversations, that's when people will even have real change. So it's another good reason to not only actually really express yourself, but make sure you're creating an environment around you where friends, family, colleagues, whomever really truly does feel safe to express themselves, because you don't want other people either to feel like they have to pretend around you. Now, that, of course, does not mean that I'm saying, oh, yeah, you should just be totally indiscriminate with your ears, let anybody say anything to you and take it in, or, you yourself have no filter, right? And that's a healthy thing. That's not what I'm saying. In the book that I have, which is Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly, I have a whole section there, and you can see more at freespeechtoday.com. But I go into the differences between healthy self-restraint, which is a good thing. Again, we don't have to say everything to everybody all the time, versus self-censorship. And the difference, I think, is when you feel like the people in your life that are supposed to actually really know you, people that, you see on a regular basis, who think that they know like the real you, if those people don't really know where you stand, or even think you stand in an opposite place of where you actually stand on issues that are important to you, then you're probably more in the self-censorship zone. And we don't want to be in that zone. It's not good for mental health, in my opinion. As a psychologist, we've always known in any Psychology 101 textbook, we learn about repression, suppression, denial. We understand that those things are not typically considered good for us, right? Psychologists are generally encouraging people to put their experience into words, to express themselves, to know that they're in a safe space where they can speak up, right? And so that I think has to really be true for basically all opinions. And that might sound a little bit controversial, but I'll tell you one of the things I discovered as I was researching for my book is I learned about people that were like former KKK members, as well as like former members of jihadi terrorist groups and things like that, people that had left those groups. And you know what they all said helped them to leave those groups? They said what helped them to leave those groups was having open dialogue with people that were willing to listen to them, even though obviously they disagreed, but they were willing to listen. And they created a space where that person could talk and say why they thought what they believed. And then the other person who was a good listener would kind of get some social capital then with that person and could also share their beliefs. So I would just encourage you again, this doesn't mean that you have to listen to everything everybody says all the time or say everything that you feel all the time with no filter. But we do want to think about that difference between self-censorship and self-restraint. Self-restraint, again, is just having a filter and being a little discriminate about who you'll listen to. But self-censorship is when we start cutting off family members or dropping people that we've been friends with for years because they voted a different way than we did, or because maybe we have different opinions about some political topic, point where we have to start pretending to each other. I think that causes a lot of stress. It also costs a lot of cognitive energy. It's like being a double agent or something, where you're standing around with all the other soccer moms and pretending, smiling and nodding. It's a lot of mental effort, and then you're not even getting any genuine social connection out of it. So also, more mental health benefits of free speech here is that putting things into words boosts problem solving skills. This is something that shouldn't be any surprise at all. We don't need psychology studies to tell us this, but of course there are thousands showing that, when you have competent, knowledgeable people, they make more progress and come up with better solutions to problems. When they talk about the problem with other people and engage in problem-solving dialogue, that's how they get more creative and learn from each other, right? So there's a million and one reasons why free speech is good for mental health. It's empowering and it helps us to solve problems, which increases our self-efficacy, which is our belief in our ability to solve problems in the world. And self-efficacy is very strongly associated with good mental health outcomes. So now evolutionary psychologists actually look at the fact that human beings are really the only species that has the gift of language on the level that we have it. Now, certainly there are, I know like dolphins make noises and they communicate in certain ways, but humans are the only ones where we have language that actually includes symbolic type thought, right? So I could say like, oh, I had a dream, right? So, or I could tell you, oh, well, I'm going to make a recipe and it has 6 ingredients and here's what you do with it. So humans can rapidly exchange complex, sophisticated information, and we can rapidly form social bonds and trust just through our language. It's very unique about us as a species. And evolutionary psychologists have speculated that it's part of the reason why we've even been able to evolve to such a sophisticated species. So I'm super excited to see more people joining in. Happy 4th of July. And I encourage you, if you want to share any comments, questions, or stories or whatever about the role of free speech in your life. I was sharing as well earlier that I used to be kind of a free speech scaredy cat. I would, especially in the media and different things like that. I would be really afraid that if I said something, that somebody didn't like, that it would be a really big deal. And it cost me a lot of mental energy, and it cost me a lot of stress. And around the time of COVID, when I was in a situation where I had a 3-year-old son, and people, to go anywhere, you had to put him in a mask. And I really didn't want to do that to my son for like multiple hours a day. He was getting to the age where he was going to be going to like a preschool program. And I said, oh no, the first experience of his life of being out of the house all day, he's going to be in a mask, and everybody else is too. The whole thing just seemed nuts to me. So, but I couldn't understand, why are no more psychologists talking about this? So I wrote a blog about the harms of masking children for hours and days and years on end, shared it with some colleagues to say, am I missing something here? Because like, how come nobody else is talking about this before I share this publicly? Am I going to embarrass myself? Am I missing something super obvious? And I got the weirdest response. They said, no, Chloe, everything in your blog makes perfect sense, but you should not share it because it could discourage people from masking their children. And of course, I was like, okay, that makes no sense, because the blog is about good reasons why maybe it could harm children to them. So anyway, I went ahead and shared the blog, and it felt so good. It got picked up by all kinds of people I admire, like Clay Travis and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's now director of the National Institute of Health. And it sparked a lot of dialogue. And that was actually what got me interested in this topic of the mental health benefits of free speech, because I started noticing that by talking about this topic that I had previously felt was so taboo that I didn't even dare share my blog about it without putting it out to some colleagues and stuff first. I was so nervous that when I took the plunge and started sharing about it, I had a lot more thoughts. It developed my thoughts, and I sharpened my thinking. I felt closer to people. I was being more myself and more authentic with people. So if you're joining late, we've been talking about the mental health benefits of free speech and how it, I think, can even help us to overcome the loneliness epidemic, because we don't have to pretend with each other. We don't have to be, living in fear. So what happens when we interrupt this process, this wonderful, healthy process about the mental health benefits of free speech? So self-censorship, repression, suppression, denial. You see this man on screen, he has kind of like a red explosion in his head, and he's got steam coming out of his ears, and his arms are folded. He's obviously upset, but he's saying, I don't know. He's acting like, have you ever had that? We've all had that, right? Where maybe especially the cliche is for gentlemen that they ask their girlfriend, what's the matter? And she says, nothing. And you're like, I know something's wrong, right? But sometimes we can even detach ourselves from knowing. Happy 4th of July from Canada, Andrew. Thanks for saying hi. I encourage people to say hi in the chat. I know it's super hard right now, I think, free speech in Canada. So especially if you're somewhere in the world that you don't have free speech, by all means, you've got it here, at least in my chat. So please do feel free to sound off. So the more that when we repress and suppress and deny ourselves, when we don't express ourselves, guess what? We actually become less aware of our own thoughts. Is that wild or what? But it's true. So denial is kind of like the final stage. Suppression is when you consciously, I'm going to get it backwards. I always get repression and suppression backwards, but suppression, I believe, is when you consciously stop yourself from speaking. You're like, oh, I better not say that. And then the next step is repression, where it kind of doesn't even occur to you to say. But if somebody else said it, you might be like, oh, yeah, that's what I think too. And then denial is when you've been pushing it down for so long, stuffing it in the back of your mental closet for so long, that even if somebody else verbalizes your actual opinion, you don't even really fully recognize it. It's like you've detached from that part of yourself. So that's what I see here happening with this, cartoon type picture. Now, I also talk in my book, which is, I hope everybody gets it because it would be so nice. I actually got dropped by my literary agent. And my previous publisher would not touch my new book, Here with a 10-Foot Pole. It was really frustrating, but I found a wonderful publisher, Skyhorse Publishing, and they actually did Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s latest book, as well as Melania Trump's latest book. So, make America healthy again. I want to do that with free speech. So one of the things I discuss in the book is common objections to free speech. And one of the common objections to free speech is, well, what about safe spaces? Don't people need safe spaces, where only certain things can be said? My answer is that in extremely limited circumstances, and I'm talking about like a private psychotherapy group, maybe for women that have suffered sexual assault, like that would be like a safe space where like you're going to really monitor the conversation carefully. But as far as say like a college campus or, just your life in general, safe spaces to me are basically the same thing as this ostrich that has his head buried in the sand. It doesn't make you safe to just block out the world around you and what other people actually really think and feel. For myself, even as a woman, for example, if somebody thinks that women are stupid, I would rather know how they feel so that I can either choose not to be around them, or I can try to persuade them, or I can just bear that in mind. But just trying to stifle people from seeing what they actually really think, because in my mind, I think that creates safety. I actually think that's really backwards. Also, I think that it increases anxiety and depression because can you imagine the idea that words are violence? If you had that, really misguided idea in your head that words are violence, and if people are saying the wrong words, then, your safe space is violated. What an anxiety provoking way to live, right? Or to think that if, heaven forbid, I say the wrong word, it's the same as if I became violent upon somebody. That is how ridiculous the phrase words are violence is. And I know for many people they understand it's just a metaphor, but for many people they actually take it literally, and that they carry that into this idea of safe spaces, right? So you guys, I'm going to have to jump off this soon. I only got up to slide 12 here, and I actually have so much more that I want to say about this. And I'm so encouraged to see that so many of you are on here. Actually, I'm new at all of this, so this is like super fun for me that people came on and wanted to join. So I just want to say one more thing here to close about self-censorship and safe spaces, and then, we'll round it out. But if you do like this and you want to get my book, because like I said, I had some trouble with my previous publisher, and I want to thank Skyhorse Publishing for picking up the book. So if you want to support me or the publisher, or just learn more about this topic, you can go to freespeechtoday.com and get your copy. But the idea here again with self-censorship and safe spaces is, as you can see what's going on in the picture here, this person is having real talk, right? Like they might even be disagreeing, but this person is going point by point through something, and he's sharing what he really thinks, and they're having a good dialogue, right? And so that to me is actually truly a safe space, when we can be in a place with people where we can disagree, we can have a diversity of viewpoints, and we can recognize that that's actually totally safe. You can say what you want, I can say what I want, and and we're all actually safe. So thank you so much, Andrew, as well, for sharing that the video is a minute behind and therefore it's hard to chat. I really appreciate that. I had not realized that. So I really wish I could stay on, you guys. I'm having so much fun, and I'm so encouraged and excited to see how many people are here. But I do have to jump. Andrew says also, FYI, I cannot scrub at faster speed to catch up. Okay, good to know. I'm super new at all of this. So thanks again for everybody who joined. And if you want to do freespeechtoday.com or send me a direct message or whatever, I can send you some articles for free that I've written about the mental health benefits of free speech. I wrote some for the New York Post and other places as well. So I hope you get the book, or you can just DM me for some articles. And Andrew, thanks for that. I really appreciate the encouragement. And from somebody else named Disperse, who put that in the chat as well. So I'm going to sign off, you guys, but thank you so much. This has truly been so much fun.